A boy ran to the hospital with his baby sister. But when the doctor heard why... In the small town of Millbrook, nestled in the heart of rural America, lived 12-year-old Tommy Carter. With a mop of unruly brown hair, bright green eyes, and a smattering of freckles across his nose, Tommy was the very picture of youthful energy and curiosity. Known throughout the neighborhood for his kindness and adventurous spirit, Tommy was always the first to help a friend in need or embark on a new exploration of the woods behind his house. Tommy lived with his parents, Jack and Sarah Carter, and his 6-month-old baby sister, Lily. The Carters were a tight-knit family, their modest home filled with love and laughter. Jack worked long hours at the local factory to make ends meet, while Sarah juggled part-time work at the diner with taking care of baby Lily. Despite their financial struggles, the Carters always made time for each other. Every Sunday, they would gather for a family picnic in the park, with Tommy proudly pushing Lily's stroller and regaling his parents with tales of his week's adventures. Tommy had taken to his role as big brother with enthusiasm and dedication. From the moment Lily was born, he had appointed himself her protector and playmate. He would spend hours entertaining her with silly faces and improvised puppet shows, delighting in her gurgles and giggles. At school, Tommy was an average student, but excelled in subjects that captured his imagination. His favorite class was science, where his natural curiosity found an outlet. His teacher, Miss Johnson, often remarked on Tommy's knack for asking insightful questions and his eagerness to understand how things worked. Tommy's best friend was Alex, a quiet, bookish boy who lived next door. The two were an unlikely pair. Tommy all action and impulse, Alex thoughtful and cautious. But their friendship was strong, built on shared secrets, backyard adventures, and a mutual love for comic books. As summer approached, Tommy looked forward to days spent exploring the creek behind his house, teaching Lily to recognize different bird calls, and working on his treehouse project with Alex. Little did he know that this summer would challenge him in ways he could never have imagined, testing his courage, quick thinking, and the depth of his love for his family. The stage was set in Millbrook, an ordinary town about to witness an extraordinary display of a young boy's bravery and determination. Tommy Carter, with his freckled face and kind heart, was about to embark on a journey that would change not only his life, but the lives of those around him, leaving an indelible mark on the community and redefining what it means to be a hero. The day that would change Tommy's life forever began like any other summer morning in Millbrook. The sun rose over the sleepy town, its warm rays filtering through the curtains of the Carter home. Tommy woke early, excited about the day ahead. He had plans to work on the treehouse with Alex, and then spend the afternoon watching Lily while his mom took a much-needed nap. As Tommy bounded down the stairs, he found his mother in the kitchen, where Lily balanced on her hip as she attempted to make breakfast one-handed. Sarah looked tired, dark circles under her eyes testament to another night of broken sleep with a teething baby. "Morning, Mom." "Morning, Lilybug," Tommy chirped, reaching out to tickle his sister's chubby cheek. Lily giggled, reaching for her big brother with pudgy hands. Sarah smiled warily. "Good morning, sweetheart. Would you mind watching Lily for a bit while I finish breakfast? Your dad had to go in early today." Tommy nodded eagerly, taking Lily into his arms. He carried her to the living room, setting her down on her playmat surrounded by colorful toys. As he played with his sister, making her laugh with silly voices and peekaboo games, Tommy felt a surge of protectiveness. He loved being a big brother and took his responsibilities seriously. After breakfast, Tommy helped his mom clean up, then headed out to meet Alex. The two boys spent the morning working on their treehouse, hammering boards, and discussing their grand plans for secret compartments and a pulley system. It was early afternoon when Tommy returned home, finding his mother asleep on the couch with Lily napping in her portable crib nearby. Not wanting to wake them, Tommy quietly made himself a sandwich and settled in the armchair with a comic book. He was deeply engrossed in the adventures of his favorite superhero when a small sound caught his attention. Looking up, he saw Lily stirring in her crib. As he watched, his sister's face scrunched up, turning an alarming shade of red. Tommy put down his comic and moved closer, concern growing as Lily's face continued to redden. Her tiny hands were balled into fists, and she seemed to be struggling to breathe. Panic rising in his chest, Tommy gently shook his mother's shoulder. Mom, wake up. Something's wrong with Lily." Sarah jolted awake, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. She rushed to the crib, scooping Lily into her arms. "She's having trouble breathing," Sarah said, her voice tight with fear. "We need to get her to the hospital." Tommy watched as his mother tried to soothe Lily, whose breathing was becoming more labored by the second. Sarah reached for her phone, but her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. "I'll call 911, Tommy said, grabbing the phone. But as he dialed, a recorded message played. "Due to severe weather conditions, emergency services are currently experiencing high call volumes. Please hold for the next available operator." Tommy looked out the window, noticing for the first time the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. A summer storm was rolling in fast, and with it the threat of downed power lines and flooded roads. Sarah was becoming increasingly frantic, trying everything she could think of to help Lily breathe. "We can't wait for an ambulance," she said, her voice cracking. "We need to get her to the hospital now." Tommy's mind raced. His dad was at work, unreachable. Their only car was in the shop for repairs. The hospital was on the other side of town, at least a 30-minute walk. And with the storm coming, in that moment, Tommy made a decision. "Mom, give her to me," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'll run to the hospital. I know a shortcut through the woods. It'll be faster than waiting." Sarah hesitated, torn between the need for immediate action and the fear of entrusting her baby to her 12-year-old son. But one look at Lily's struggling form made the decision for her. "Okay," she said, carefully transferring Lily to Tommy's arms. "Be careful. Run as fast as you can. I'll keep trying to get through to 911, and I'll follow as soon as I can." Tommy nodded, cradling Lily close to his chest. As he stepped out the front door, the first drops of rain began to fall. The wind was picking up, whipping his hair around his face. But Tommy didn't hesitate. With determination in his eyes and precious cargo in his arms, he set off at a run towards the woods, the storm clouds looming ominously overhead. In that moment, Tommy Carter ceased to be just a 12-year-old boy. He became his sister's lifeline, her only hope. And as he ran, feet pounding against the earth, the true test of his courage and love was only beginning. As Tommy raced through the woods, his heart pounding in time with his feet hitting the ground, the reality of the situation began to sink in. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, as heavy as the baby in his arms. Lily's labored breathing was a constant reminder of the urgency of his mission. The shortcut through the woods, which had always seemed like a grand adventure during his daytime explorations, now took on a more sinister aspect. Shadows deepened as the storm clouds blocked out the sun, and the wind whipping through the trees created eerie whispers and creaks. About halfway through his journey, Tommy stumbled upon a startling revelation. As he navigated a particularly tricky section of the path, leaping over exposed roots and ducking under low-hanging branches, he realized that Lily's breathing had changed. The labored gasps had given way to a high-pitched wheeze, and her tiny body felt hot against his chest, despite the cool rain that had begun to fall. Tommy skidded to a stop, his mind racing. He remembered a first aid class his school had offered last year. The instructor had talked about allergic reactions and something called anaphylaxis. The symptoms she described seemed eerily similar to what Lily was experiencing. With shaking hands, Tommy gently laid Lily down on a relatively dry patch of ground under a large oak tree. He looked at his baby sister, really looked at her, and felt a chill run down his spine. Lily's face was swollen, her lips taking on a bluish tinge. Tiny red bumps had appeared on her skin, spreading across her cheeks and down her neck. "An allergic reaction," Tommy whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. But to what? What could have caused this? His mind raced back through the events of the day, trying to pinpoint anything unusual. Then it hit him. This morning, while he was playing with Lily, he had noticed a small red mark on her arm. He had assumed it was just a mosquito bite, but now, could it have been a bee sting? Lily had never been stung before. What if she was allergic? The gravity of the situation crashed over Tommy like a wave. This wasn't just a breathing problem. This was potentially life-threatening. Lily needed help, and she needed it now. With renewed urgency, Tommy scooped Lily back into his arms. "Hang on, Lilybug," he whispered fiercely. "We're almost there. You've got to hang on." As if in response to his determination, the heavens opened up. Rain began to pour down in sheets, drenching Tommy and Lily in seconds. The path, already treacherous, became slick with mud. But Tommy pushed on, his feet slipping and sliding as he ran. Every step was a battle against the elements and his own fatigue. But with each labored breath from Lily, Tommy found new reserves of strength. He was no longer just running to the hospital. He was racing against time, against the growing threat of anaphylaxis. The woods seemed to stretch on endlessly, each familiar landmark taking an eternity to appear. But Tommy kept going, his world narrowing to the sound of Lily's breathing, the feeling of rain on his face, and the distant hope of the hospital that lay ahead. As he finally broke through the tree line, the hospital rising up before him like a beacon of hope, Tommy made a silent promise to his sister. He would get her the help she needed. He would not let her down. With the last of his strength, he sprinted across the hospital parking lot, burst through the emergency room doors, and cried out for help. Little did Tommy know that his ordeal was far from over, and that his courage and quick thinking would be tested even further in the hours to come. As Tommy burst into the emergency room, the fluorescent lights momentarily blinding him after the darkness of the storm, he was met with a scene of controlled chaos. Nurses and doctors rushed back and forth, attending to patients who had been brought in due to storm-related injuries. "Help!" Tommy cried out, his voice cracking with exhaustion and fear. "Please, my sister needs help." A nurse, her eyes widening as she took in the sight of the soaking wet boy clutching a baby, quickly approached. "What happened?" she asked, already reaching for Lily. Tommy, breathless from his run, managed to gasp out, "She can't breathe properly. I think it's an allergic reaction, maybe a bee sting." The nurse's expression turned serious as she assessed Lily's condition. "Dr. Chen," she called out, "we have a potential anaphylaxis case here." As a doctor rushed over and Lily was whisked away on a gurney, Tommy felt a moment of paralyzing fear. He had done it. He had gotten Lily to the hospital. But what if it was too late? "You did the right thing bringing her in so quickly," the nurse said, noticing Tommy's distress. "Can you tell me your name and your sister's name? We need to contact your parents." "I'm Tommy Carter, and that's my sister Lily." Tommy replied, his voice shaking. "Our mom should be on her way. Our phone wasn't working because of the storm." As the nurse went to make some calls, Tommy was left standing in the middle of the ER, dripping water onto the linoleum floor. The adrenaline that had fueled his race through the woods was wearing off, leaving him feeling drained and overwhelmed. It was then that Tommy made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. Instead of waiting as he had been told, he decided to follow the path they had taken Lily down. He needed to know what was happening to his sister. Slipping past the busy hospital staff, Tommy made his way down the hallway. He could hear urgent voices coming from one of the rooms, and, peering around the doorframe, he saw a team of medical professionals surrounding a small figure on a bed. "Lily." Tommy watched, his heart in his throat, as Dr. Chen administered an injection to Lily. "Epinephrine's in," the doctor announced. "Let's get her on oxygen and start an IV." Seeing his baby sister hooked up to machines, looking so small and vulnerable, Tommy felt a wave of guilt wash over him. If only he had noticed the bee sting earlier. If only he had recognized the signs sooner. If only he had run faster. Lost in his thoughts, Tommy didn't notice the nurse approaching until she placed a hand on his shoulder, making him jump. "You shouldn't be back here," she said gently. "Let's get you dried off and wait for your mom in the waiting room." But Tommy shook his head vehemently. "No, please," he begged. "I need to stay with Lily. I promised I'd protect her." The nurse's expression softened. "You've done an amazing job protecting her, Tommy. You got her here in time, but now you need to let the doctors do their job, okay?" Reluctantly, Tommy allowed himself to be led to the waiting room. He was given a set of dry scrubs to change into and a warm blanket, but nothing could ease the cold knot of fear in his stomach. As the minutes ticked by, Tommy's anxiety grew. Where was his mom? Was Lily going to be okay? The what-ifs and could-haves swirled in his mind, each more terrifying than the last. It was nearly an hour later when Sarah Carter burst into the waiting room, her hair wild and her clothes as soaked as Tommy's had been. "Tommy," she cried, engulfing him in a fierce hug. "Oh, thank God you're all right. Where's Lily? What's happening?" Tommy broke down then, the events of the day finally catching up with him. Through his tears, he recounted everything: the realization that Lily couldn't breathe, the decision to run through the woods, the discovery of the possible bee sting. Sarah listened, her own eyes filling with tears. "You saved her life, Tommy," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You're a hero." But Tommy didn't feel like a hero. He felt scared and small and desperately in need of reassurance that everything would be okay. As if on cue, Dr. Chen appeared in the waiting room. "Mrs. Carter?" he asked, approaching them. "I'm Dr. Chen. I've been treating Lily." Sarah stood up, clutching Tommy's hand tightly. "How is she? Is she going to be okay?" Dr. Chen's face was serious but not grim. "Lily experienced a severe allergic reaction, most likely to a bee sting as Tommy suspected. It was fortunate that she was brought in so quickly. We've stabilized her condition, but we'll need to keep her for observation for at least 24 hours. The relief that flooded through Tommy was so intense it made him dizzy. Lily was going to be okay. His mad dash through the storm hadn't been in vain. But as the doctor continued to explain Lily's condition and the precautions they would need to take in the future, Tommy realized that this ordeal was far from over. Life with a sister who had a severe allergy would mean constant vigilance, new responsibilities, and a level of caution that had never been necessary before. As Tommy sat in the hard plastic chair of the waiting room, his mother's arm around his shoulders, he knew that everything had changed. His decision to run to the hospital had saved Lily's life, but it had also ushered in a new reality for the entire Carter family. Tommy felt the weight of this realization settle on his young shoulders, a mix of pride and trepidation for what the future might hold. As the Carters adjusted to their new normal in the days following Lily's hospitalization, a secondary plot began to unfold in the small town of Millbrook. Tommy's dash through the storm, carrying his baby sister to safety, had not gone unnoticed. Alex, worried when Tommy didn't return to work on the treehouse, had ventured out into the storm to check on his friend. He arrived at the Carter house just as Sarah was leaving for the hospital. In the chaos of the moment, Sarah quickly explained what had happened before rushing off. Concerned and wanting to help, Alex began spreading the word about Tommy's heroic act. He told his parents, who told their neighbors, who told their friends at work. Soon, the story of the brave 12-year-old boy who ran through a storm to save his baby sister was the talk of the town. Millbrook had always been a close-knit community, but Tommy's story seemed to awaken something in its residents. People began to reflect on their own relationships with their siblings and children. Parents hugged their kids a little tighter, and estranged brothers and sisters reached out to reconnect. The local newspaper, the Millbrook Gazette, caught wind of the story and sent a young reporter named Jessica to interview the Carters. Jessica, fresh out of journalism school and eager to prove herself, saw more than just a heartwarming local story. She recognized a narrative about the healthcare challenges facing rural communities like Millbrook. In her article, Jessica not only recounted Tommy's brave actions, but also highlighted the fact that the Carters had to rely on their 12-year-old son to get Lily to the hospital due to lack of immediate emergency services. She pointed out the growing trend of rural hospital closures and the impact on communities like theirs. The article struck a chord with Millbrook's residents. Letters to the editor poured in, with people sharing their own experiences and concerns about healthcare access. The mayor, sensing the community's mood, called a town hall meeting to discuss the issue. Meanwhile, at Millbrook Middle School, Tommy's classmates and teachers were dealing with the aftermath in their own way. Miss Johnson, Tommy's science teacher, was particularly moved by the incident. She decided to adjust her curriculum to include more first aid and allergy awareness, believing that if Tommy's quick thinking had saved Lily, other students should have the same knowledge. Tommy's best friend Alex, inspired by Tommy's bravery, started a school club focused on community service and emergency preparedness. The club quickly gained popularity, with students eager to learn how they could make a difference in crisis situations. As these various threads of community response intertwined, Millbrook found itself in the midst of a grassroots movement. What had started as one boy's desperate run to save his sister was evolving into a town-wide conversation about healthcare, community responsibility, and the power of individuals to affect change. The Carters, still focused on Lily's recovery and adjusting to life with her newly discovered allergy, were largely unaware of the ripple effects Tommy's actions had caused. But as they would soon discover, their family's ordeal had become a catalyst for change in Millbrook, touching lives far beyond their own immediate circle. This growing movement would soon intersect with Tommy's personal journey in unexpected ways, challenging him to step up once again and forcing the town to confront some hard truths about itself and its future. In the weeks following Lily's hospitalization, the dynamics within the Carter family underwent a significant shift. Tommy, once seen as the carefree older brother, now found himself thrust into a role of increased responsibility and maturity. Sarah and Jack, profoundly grateful for Tommy's quick thinking, struggled with a complex mix of emotions. They were immensely proud of their son's bravery, but also grappled with guilt over the burden he had been forced to bear. They made conscious efforts to express their appreciation while also ensuring Tommy knew he didn't have to shoulder adult responsibilities all the time. One evening, as Tommy helped his mom prepare dinner, Sarah broached the subject. "You know, Tommy," she began, her voice soft, "what you did for Lily was incredible, but your dad and I want you to know that you don't have to be the hero all the time. It's okay to just be a kid." Tommy, stirring the pasta sauce with intense concentration, was quiet for a moment before responding. "I know, Mom, but I like being able to help. I like knowing I can make a difference." Sarah's eyes welled with tears as she pulled her son into a tight hug. In that moment, she realized that Tommy wasn't just growing up. He was discovering his own strength and sense of purpose. Tommy's relationship with Lily also evolved. He had always been a doting big brother, but now there was an added layer of protectiveness. He took it upon himself to learn everything he could about Lily's allergy, peppering Dr. Chen with questions during follow-up appointments and scouring the internet for information. Lily, too young to understand the full extent of what had happened, nonetheless seemed to sense the change in her brother. She would reach for him more often, her face lighting up with a special smile reserved just for Tommy. Outside the family, Tommy's friendships were also undergoing transformations. His bond with Alex deepened as they worked together on the new school club. Alex's unwavering support and his efforts to spread Tommy's story had strengthened their friendship in ways neither boy had anticipated. "You know," Alex said one day as they worked on the treehouse, "what you did. It was like something out of a comic book. You're a real-life superhero, Tommy." Tommy blushed, uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm not a superhero, Alex. I was just doing what anyone would do for their sister." Alex shook his head. "Not everyone would have done what you did. You should be proud." These conversations with Alex helped Tommy process his experience, allowing him to see his actions through the eyes of others and gradually come to terms with the impact he had made. Tommy's relationship with Ms. Johnson also grew closer. Impressed by his handling of the crisis, she took him under her wing, nurturing his interest in science and first aid. She saw in Tommy a student with not just aptitude, but also the rare ability to apply knowledge in high-pressure situations. "You have a gift, Tommy," she told him after class one day. "The way you were able to recognize Lily's symptoms and make quick decisions, that's something special. I think you could have a future in medicine if you wanted." Her words planted a seed in Tommy's mind, opening up possibilities he had never considered before. Perhaps the most surprising relationship development came with Jessica, the young reporter from the Millbrook Gazette. Intrigued by Tommy's story and impressed by his maturity, she began to see him as not just a subject for her article, but as a valuable source of insight into the community's issues. Jessica would often seek Tommy out for his perspective on how the lack of emergency services affected young people in Millbrook. Their conversations, while initially focused on his experience with Lily, gradually expanded to cover broader topics affecting the town. "You've got a unique voice, Tommy," Jessica told him during one of their talks. "You've seen firsthand how big issues like healthcare access can affect individual families. That's a powerful story to tell." Through these evolving relationships, Tommy began to see himself in a new light. He was no longer just Tommy Carter, average kid from Millbrook. He was Tommy Carter, loving brother, loyal friend, engaged student, and increasingly, a voice for his community. As summer began to wane and the new school year approached, Tommy found himself at the center of a web of deepened relationships and new connections. Each interaction, each conversation was shaping him, challenging him to grow beyond the boundaries he had previously set for himself. Little did Tommy know that these strengthened bonds and new alliances would soon be put to the test, as Millbrook faced a crisis that would require every ounce of the community spirit his story had inspired. The climax of Tommy's journey came on a crisp autumn evening, 3 months after his dash to the hospital with Lily. The town hall was packed for an emergency meeting called by the mayor. The issue at hand, the potential closure of Millbrook's only hospital. Tommy sat between his parents, Lily sleeping peacefully in Sarah's arms. The tension in the room was palpable as the mayor explained the situation. Due to budget cuts and decreasing rural populations, the state was considering closing several small-town hospitals. Millbrook's was on the list. As community members voiced their concerns and frustrations, Tommy felt a growing unease. He thought about his run through the woods, about how every second had counted in getting Lily the help she needed. What would happen to Millbrook if there was no hospital? How many lives would be at risk? The meeting was reaching a fever pitch when Tommy, almost without realizing it, stood up. The room gradually fell silent as people noticed the young boy standing with determination on his face. "Tommy?" the mayor said, surprised. "Do you have something to say?" Tommy swallowed hard, suddenly aware of all the eyes on him. But then he felt his mother's encouraging touch on his arm, saw Alex's supportive nod from across the room, and found his courage. "I do," he said, his voice stronger than he expected. "I want to tell you about the day I had to run to the hospital with my baby sister." For the next few minutes, Tommy recounted his experience, the fear, the desperation, the relief of finally reaching the hospital. His voice shook at times, but he pressed on, driven by the importance of what he had to say. "If the hospital hadn't been there," he concluded, "I don't know what would have happened to Lily. And I keep thinking about all the other families in Millbrook. Don't they deserve to have help close by when they need it?" As Tommy sat down, the room erupted in applause. His words had cut through the bureaucratic arguments and political posturing, reminding everyone of the human cost of losing their local hospital. Inspired by Tommy's speech, others began to share their own stories. The nurse who had delivered 3 generations of Millbrook babies, the elderly man whose life was saved by the quick response of the ER team, the cancer patient who relied on the hospital for regular treatments. Jessica, who had been covering the meeting for the Gazette, recognized the power of the moment. She began live streaming the testimonies on the paper's social media page, allowing Tommy's words and the community's response to reach beyond the town hall. As the stream gained viewers, comments began pouring in from neighboring towns facing similar issues. What had started as a local meeting was rapidly transforming into a regional movement. The mayor, sensing the shift in energy, called for the formation of a community action committee to fight the hospital closure. Hands shot up across the room as people volunteered to help. In that moment, Tommy realized the true impact of his actions. His run to save Lily had not only saved her life, but had also galvanized an entire community to fight for their collective well-being. As the meeting adjourned, people crowded around Tommy, thanking him for speaking up. Miss Johnson beamed with pride, Alex clapped him on the back, and Jessica was already scribbling notes for her article. But it was the look on his parents' faces that affected Tommy the most, a mixture of pride, love, and awe at the young man their son was becoming. As they enveloped him in a family hug, Lily reached out from Sarah's arms, grasping Tommy's hand. In that small gesture was a reminder of why this fight mattered. For family, for community, for the future. The battle to save Millbrook's hospital was just beginning. But in that moment, united by a common purpose, the town had never felt stronger. In the days following the town hall meeting, Millbrook buzzed with a newfound energy and purpose. The Community Action Committee, quickly dubbed Save Our Hospital, or SOH, wasted no time in mobilizing their resources and strategizing their approach to prevent the hospital's closure. Tommy, much to his surprise, found himself at the center of these efforts. His story had become a rallying cry for the campaign, a tangible example of why the hospital was so crucial to Millbrook. The committee, recognizing the power of Tommy's voice, asked him to be a key spokesperson for their cause. At first, Tommy was overwhelmed by the responsibility. "I don't know if I can do it," he confessed to his parents one evening. "What if I mess up? What if I let everyone down?" Jack placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Tommy, you've already shown more courage than most adults I know. You can do this. And remember, you're not alone. The whole town is behind you." Bolstered by his family's support and driven by the memory of his desperate run to save Lily, Tommy threw himself into the campaign. He worked with Jessica to craft his story into a powerful narrative, learning about effective communication and the art of public speaking. Ms. Johnson helped Tommy research the broader implications of rural hospital closures, guiding him through medical journals and policy papers. Tommy's natural curiosity, combined with his newfound purpose, made him a quick study. Soon, he was able to speak not just from personal experience, but also with an understanding of the larger healthcare crisis facing rural America. Alex and the school club he had started became an integral part of the SOH efforts. They organized bake sales, car washes, and other fundraisers to support the campaign. Tommy was touched by how his best friend had turned his moment of heroism into a sustained movement for change. As the campaign gained momentum, it faced its share of challenges. The state officials arguing for the hospital's closure cited budget constraints and efficiency metrics, arguing that the low patient numbers didn't justify keeping the hospital open. They suggested that residents could use the hospital in the next town over, glossing over the fact that it was an hour's drive away. The SOH committee, led by Tommy's impassioned pleas, countered with stories of lives saved by the local hospital and argued that healthcare was a right, not a privilege to be determined by population density. They highlighted the potential economic impact of the closure, pointing out that the hospital was one of the town's largest employers. Despite their best efforts, the campaign hit a major setback when the state announced that they were moving forward with their closure plans. The news hit Millbrook hard, with many feeling that their voices had been ignored by distant bureaucrats who didn't understand their reality. Tommy, however, refused to give up. Inspired by Jessica's use of social media during the town hall meeting, he proposed a new strategy. "What if we could show them what it really means to live an hour away from emergency care?" he suggested to the committee. The idea evolved into a powerful demonstration. On a designated day, Millbrook residents would record their hour-long drives to the next nearest hospital, sharing their thoughts and fears along the way. The videos would be live-streamed and shared across social media platforms, putting faces and voices to the statistics. The event, dubbed The Longest Hour, was a logistical challenge, but the entire town rallied to make it happen. Local businesses donated fuel for the drivers, tech-savvy teenagers helped set up the live streams, and Jessica coordinated with media outlets to ensure maximum coverage. On the day of the event, hundreds of cars left Millbrook in a somber procession. Tommy, riding with his parents and Lily, narrated their journey, his voice steady as he described the anxiety of watching the minutes tick by, imagining various emergency scenarios. Other stories poured in as the streams went live. An elderly couple spoke of their fear of being unable to reach their doctors quickly. A pregnant woman shared her worries about potential complications during childbirth. A father described the panic of wondering if he could get his asthmatic son to help in time during an attack. The rawness and authenticity of these stories struck a chord far beyond Millbrook. The live streams went viral, picked up by national news outlets and shared by celebrities and politicians alike. The Longest Hour trended on social media, with people across the country sharing their own experiences with rural healthcare access. The spotlight on Millbrook intensified. Journalists descended on the town, and state officials found themselves under increasing pressure to address the issue. The governor, sensing the shifting political winds, announced that he would be visiting Millbrook to meet with community members and reassess the situation. As Tommy prepared to meet with the governor, he felt the weight of his town's hopes on his shoulders. He knew that this could be their last chance to save the hospital. The conflict was far from resolved, but for the first time in weeks, there was a glimmer of hope in Millbrook. Looking at Lily, peaceful in her crib, Tommy steeled himself for the challenge ahead. He had run through a storm to save his sister. Now he was ready to face a different kind of storm to save his town. The day of the governor's visit dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the tension that hung over Millbrook. The town square was packed with residents, many holding homemade signs supporting the hospital. News vans lined the streets, their satellite dishes reaching towards the sky like metallic sunflowers. Tommy stood with his family and the SOH committee members, his heart pounding as the governor's motorcade pulled up. As the politicians and their aides filed out of their vehicles, Tommy caught sight of a familiar face. Dr. Chen, Lily's doctor from that fateful day. The governor, a tall man with a politician's smile, made his way through the crowd, shaking hands and offering reassurances. When he reached Tommy, his smile faltered slightly, recognition flickering in his eyes. "You must be Tommy," he said, his voice carrying to the news cameras. "I've heard a lot about you, young man." Tommy took a deep breath, remembering all the preparation he had done with Jessica and Miss Johnson. "Thank you for coming, Governor," he said, his voice clear and steady. "We have a lot to show you about why our hospital is so important." What followed was a whirlwind tour of Millbrook and its hospital. Tommy, alongside Dr. Chen and the SOH committee, led the governor through the facilities, introducing him to staff and patients whose lives had been touched by the hospital's care. The turning point came when they reached the pediatric ward. There, in a room filled with children battling various illnesses, the governor's carefully maintained political facade cracked. Tommy watched as the man's eyes filled with tears while listening to a young cancer patient describe how the local hospital had allowed her to receive treatment while staying close to her family. As they left the ward, the governor pulled Tommy aside. "I have to admit, son," he said, his voice low, "you've given me a lot to think about. This isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet, is it?" Tommy shook his head. "No, sir," he replied. "It's about people. It's about community. It's about knowing that help is there when you need it most." The governor nodded thoughtfully. "I think," he said, "it's time we looked at the situation from a new angle. Tommy, how would you like to be part of a task force to explore innovative solutions for rural healthcare?" Tommy's eyes widened. This was more than he had dared to hope for. It wasn't a guarantee that the hospital would be saved, but it was a chance to be part of creating a real, lasting solution. As word spread through the crowd that the governor was considering new options, a cautious optimism began to take hold. The battle wasn't over, but a new chapter was beginning, one in which Millbrook and Tommy would play a crucial role in shaping the future of rural healthcare. In the months that followed the governor's visit, Tommy found himself on a journey of personal growth that he could never have anticipated. As a member of the Rural Healthcare Task Force, he was exposed to complex issues and ideas that challenged and expanded his worldview. The task force meetings, held in the state capitol, were initially overwhelming. Tommy, by far the youngest member, often felt out of his depth among the doctors, administrators, and policy experts. But he soon realized that his perspective as both a young person and someone with direct experience of the rural healthcare crisis was uniquely valuable. Tommy threw himself into learning everything he could about healthcare policy, rural demographics, and innovative medical technologies. His natural curiosity, combined with his personal stake in the outcome, made him a dedicated and quick study. Miss Johnson, proud of her students' growth, became a mentor, helping Tommy understand the more complex aspects of his research. As the months passed, Tommy noticed changes in himself. He was more confident speaking up in meetings, even when his ideas differed from those of the adults around him. He learned to articulate his thoughts clearly and persuasively, a skill that served him well beyond the task force. But it wasn't just in the realm of healthcare policy that Tommy was growing. His experiences had given him a new perspective on his family, his community, and his own potential. He found himself appreciating his parents in new ways, recognizing the sacrifices they made and the strength they showed in facing challenges. His relationship with Lily deepened, the bond forged in crisis evolving into a tender, protective love that went beyond typical sibling affection. In school, Tommy's newfound confidence and sense of purpose reflected in his academic performance. He approached his studies with renewed vigor, seeing each subject as a potential tool for making a difference in the world. His teachers noticed the change, commenting on his increased engagement and maturity. Tommy's friendships, too, evolved. While he remained close with Alex, he also formed new connections with peers who shared his passion for community service and social issues. The school club Alex had started continued to thrive, with Tommy often sharing insights from his work on the task force. Perhaps the most profound change was in Tommy's sense of self and his vision for his future. The boy who had once been content with average grades and vague dreams of adulthood now saw himself as someone capable of effecting real change in the world. The seed planted by Miss Johnson's suggestion of a future in medicine had taken root, growing into a tentative but fervent aspiration. One evening, as Tommy sat on the porch swing with his mom, Lily sleeping peacefully in her arms, he reflected on the whirlwind of the past few months. "Mom," he said softly, Do you think I could really become a doctor someday?" Sarah looked at her son, seeing not just the boy he was, but the man he was becoming. "Oh, Tommy," she said, her voice full of emotion, "I think you can become anything you set your mind to. You've already proven that." Tommy nodded, a mix of determination and wonder in his eyes. He thought back to that rainy day when he had run through the woods with Lily in his arms. Terrified, but determined. He had learned since then that courage wasn't about being fearless, but about facing your fears and doing what needed to be done anyway. As he looked out at the quiet streets of Millbrook, Tommy felt a deep sense of connection to his community and an equally profound sense of possibility for the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he was ready to face them, one step at a time. As autumn gave way to winter, Millbrook received news that would change the town's trajectory. The governor, influenced by the task force's recommendations and the compelling stories from communities like Millbrook, announced a new rural healthcare initiative. The plan included funding to keep Millbrook's hospital open, along with investments in telemedicine and mobile health units to better serve rural areas. The town erupted in celebration, with impromptu parades and joyful gatherings in the streets. At the center of it all was Tommy, hailed as a hometown hero whose courage and determination had sparked a movement. In the midst of the festivities, Tommy found a quiet moment with Lily. As he held his sister, now a curious toddler with no memory of the crisis that had brought them to this point, he felt the weight of the journey they had been through. Tommy realized that his race to the hospital that stormy day had been more than just a desperate act to save his sister. It had been the first step on a path that led him to discover his own strength, the power of community, and the ability of one person, even a child, to make a real difference in the world. As he looked at Lily's smiling face, Tommy made a silent promise. He would continue to run, not in desperation, but with purpose. He would run towards a future where every community had access to the care they needed, where no child would have to face the fear he had faced that day. The boy who had run into the hospital, carrying a baby in his arms, had grown into a young man carrying the hopes of his community and the promise of a better tomorrow. And in that growth, in that commitment to a larger purpose, lay the true heart of heroism.